Welcome, everybody, back here to Segal Talks at the Martin E. Segal Theater Center, the Graduate Center CUNY in Midtown Manhattan. It's a kind of a grayish, colder day here in November, and those wonderful sunny days after the election are gone, and the country is still in turmoil. But we do think there is again a light at the end of the tunnel, and I think that democratic forces here did prevail. I do think that the contribution of the arts are important, have been important, and will be important, and to show that theater especially and performance can be a place where we can reflect the complexities of this life that we are living right now in the 21st century, that it helps us to know where we come from, where we are going to, and that it helps to create meaning and to make us comfortable with what's coming ahead in the future, and also be part of shaping it. We have spoken to so many artists since March, theater artists, to hear their own experience of the COVID crisis, and now we also move on to discuss this theater and the political performance and the political, but also dedicate series to theater of the real as last week, and this week will be towards the idea of the dramaturgy and the new dramaturgy, and also the multifaceted parts of that field that is significant, that is growing, and also very, very much connected to the Segal Center, and also here the PhD program at the Graduate Center CUNY. And with us today, we have a dramaturg from a theater that really was legendary, still is, but especially at the time when he was there. This is Sebastian Kaiser from Berlin. Sebastian, welcome. Thanks for taking the time. He was
thanks for the invitation.
yeah, thank you. He was part of the Volksbühne at the Rosa-Luxemburg-Platz in Berlin. It became an iconic theater at a time of change, or in time after change, after the opening of the wall. It created a unique theater, and it was part of the engine of change and defining, actually also almost an aesthetic of the city, but also was a place that of thinking, of experimenting, collaborating, and of open access discussions, and many, many things around. And Sebastian, who actually also is born or was born in East Berlin, I was working there in over 30 productions, 30, with Frank Castorf, who put his imprint, I think, on this time post opening of the wall, and also with Vegard Vinge and Ida Müller. Both of them also have been at the Segal, great, great theater artists, and so many, many others. It's a theater that has been influential around the world. The style of the Volksbühne has been as significant in a way for the time as maybe the Beatles or the Rolling Stones were for kind of a contemporary, also political theater. Also René Polisch's work came out at that time. So he curated also large-scale political and artistic events. For example, the Africa Conference, 130 years of the Berlinization of a continent, and he cooperated in funding the movement. DM25, if I say it right. He was artistic director of an international festival, the Balaklava Odyssey, and now he also collaborates and works in China. He has deep ties to the Soviet Union, also through his marriage, or the former parts of the Soviet Union, Ukraine. And he has studied music and theater at Leipzig, or no, he has taught at the Freie Universität Berlin and the Music and Theater School in Leipzig, and Nanjing University, and in Oslo. So he is one of the workers in the great field of theater and in dramaturgy. And I have many questions for him, and to know what part really did theater play after that big time of change, something which we feel we are experiencing now in the US and North America. So I would like to know from him, what was it really like? What was the contribution of the theater to the city, and also his work as a dramaturg? How does he define it? So Sebastian, first, thank you for joining us, for being with us. Where are you, and what time is it?
I'm there where I was born, actually. So I'm in the part of Berlin which was former East Berlin. So I'm living here, not far away from the location and the district where I was born. It's 6 o'clock, 6 p.m. in the night, and it's a lousy November day. City is in a so-called light lockdown, and the leaves are falling. So to have a walk now outside, what is still possible? So it's not possible to enter a theater. It's not possible to go to a restaurant, but it's possible at least to have a walk outside. But this is in this November month. It's
So there is the lockdown.
it can be a bit depressive.
Yeah, I mean, it's these famous days when at 3:30, 4 o'clock, it gets dark in the afternoon.
Right. It's around 4 o'clock. It gets dark already. Yeah.
So there is a lockdown at the moment.
They don't call it lockdown. They call it lockdown light. And lockdown light means especially so that the people who are working in the companies and in the companies they are forced to go to home office to work at home, but the main target of this lockdown light is actually the public space, the culture institutions. So all theaters are closed, all opera houses are closed, the restaurants are closed, and but at least we can go out. So the stores are open, and it's not so hard or so tough like it is, for instance, in Italy or in France, where we really cannot go to the street. So this is no problem to move and to walk outside. And of course, it's limited, the groups and the people with whom you are allowed to meet on the street. This is limited. So this is lockdown light. But churches are open, for instance, and this is possible to go ahead with a religion.
Yeah, you said there was an opening of a Castorf production, and I think 50 people were allowed and had to be far away. But churches are open. It's still it's kind of puzzling, all the rules.
Right, yeah. Frank Castorf had premiere with the opera in Munich. The opera house has a capacity of more than 2,000 people, and for the premiere, 50 people were allowed. Yeah. But the churches, at least at that moment, were open. So they also see the priority. Also lockdowns, and lockdowns have priorities, and in that case, it's not the God of the opera, but it's the God in heaven who has the priority.
Incredible. So Sebastian, tell us a little bit, I mean, not everybody knows, tell us a little bit about the Volksbühne Berlin, about the theater where you were, and about your work.
I mean, don't forget that I started to work there, not of course in the 90s, because I'm too young for this. I started to work there in 2008 or 2009. Yeah. So actually my entire theater education I got from Volksbühne. Yeah. Because you must imagine the very special time in the 89 and 90 when the two political ideological blocks, so communism and the rest of the self-identity free world, when they came together. They were divided in the entire world, but in Berlin they were especially divided in one city, and then you had the wall in the city. And the wall was taken out of the historical chessboard overnight. And then, of course, you have a certain clash of these big blocks, the clash of two narratives, of two logics, of two languages. Even if we were speaking the same language in Berlin, German, of course, yeah, there were different political languages that were used, different attitudes to go to the public space to talk and to communicate. And this was an extremely intense time when these two political blocks clashed. And Volksbühne was in the situation that, let's say, in this vacuum, which was created in the 90s, in the early 90s, by the clash of these blocks, that some very, very special spaces emerged. You can call it heterotopic spaces, where things were possible to say, to try, and to experiment, which were not possible in that way, not in the former East Bloc, not even in the free West theaters before. And as far as I'm from the East side, the destabilization in these times, the political destabilization, but also in the biographies, because the majority of the people, of the parents, for instance, from the classmates or from my fellows in school, they lost their jobs in these months and in these years of the early 90s. And there was a big destabilization, and the need to look and to find a new orientation. And the language to do it was everywhere limited. So it was limited in the family, it was limited in the school, it was limited later in the university. And in that frame, the Volksbühne played that absolutely unique role in the 90s, and especially then beginning with directorship of Frank Castorf and his dramaturgical team around Matthias Lilienthal and Karl Hegemann. Yeah. So they created a very special theater, which was always more than a theater. So on the one hand, of course, they offered performances with very different styles and aesthetic. So like Frank Castorf did it, who was interpreting classical drama text, but integrating to these drama texts and performances, always some contemporary questions. There was Christoph Schlingsief with his performances, which were always crashing and smashing the borders of the theater. Yeah. So he made actually as an ancestor of Joseph Beuys, and as an ancestor, sitting on the shoulders maybe of Joseph Beuys, he created performances which you can perceive as social sculptures. There was Christoph Marthaler with his philosophy of slowness, and so on. So there were these shows, but beside this, there were also always discussions, rock concerts on the Rosa-Luxemburg Square, where Volksbühne is located. So actually, you could go every day to the theater, and every day you got a new spirit there. In performances and in the theater show on the one hand, but also in philosophical discussions, in a concert, in just maybe in some personal meetings in the canteen of the Volksbühne, which was in this heterotopic space of the theater, maybe one more exclusive heterotopic space, the cantina.
Yeah, this was really electrifying. I think German theater, Western theater, it was a new pulse-giving inspirations. The Volksbühne means the theater of the people, almost like something like public theater, as we could call it here. It also has a long history, right? Maybe tell us a little.
Right. So the special thing with the Volksbühne is that it was not like normally the theaters in the West and in Western Europe. They were not erected and established by the order of a king or by the decision of a government or of the city council or something like that. But it was a result. The building of the house was a result of the so-called workers' movement and theater movement. So in the 19th century, you must imagine the situation in Germany was a situation where you still had censorship, and all these authors, which are now so classical to us, for instance, Gerhard Hauptmann, or also parts of the plays of Henrik Ibsen, they were simply forbidden. And there's a trick in the German law system that you can organize something what you can call a closed society, geschlossene Gesellschaft, a closed society. And for instance, not institutions, but registered societies, registered unions, eingetragene Vereine, they can organize those events in a closed society. And so you could become a member of this theater movement and of this labor movement. And by doing so, you had the right to go to those and to join those shows and performances which were offered by the theater society. You could just join them, and by that you could avoid the censorship. And that movement existed for a pretty long time, so for some decades. And it had an enormous amount of members. So when we see today this amount of people, it was something like, I think, 100,000 only in Berlin. After some decades, there was a wish also to build an own theater, and there is a story about that then with each show, the theater movement was presenting and showing the visitors, and the audience had to donate in groschen. So 10 cents, workers' groschen, to erect this theater, which opened then in 1915, I think. 1914, 1915, it opened. So it existed for more than 100 years. So very special conditions as a as an explicit working theater, this house was funded.
Yeah, incredible history that workers, so that system of subscription, created their own theater, and it was possible to have it almost like the theater in Switzerland during the World War II, where Brecht went to work. Also thanks to dramaturg, which was owned privately, and it was most probably the only free theater in the German-speaking countries to be able to play the plays they wanted from France, also, and from America in the time of Third Reich. So the Volksbühne had a great history. I think also in front of it, the Nazis had their parades and their troops. So it's an incredible, significant place in Berlin and for Germany. And after the opening of the wall, that theater became like a crystal, a diamond, where more light was coming out, perhaps, than even was put in. So you were a dramaturg there, and you joined that theater. What was the job of the dramaturg? What did you think is the job of a dramaturg, or was the job at that time of change?
Of change. So I was much later. I was not in this time of the really of the change.
You were still part of that. Yeah, so what was that job? What did a dramaturg do at the under Castorf? And
but this is also always what my mother was asking me, and I never found a real proper answer to this. In general, to answer generally the question what the dramaturg is doing, I would maybe answer that it is someone who wants to direct it by himself, but is not talented enough or brave enough to be a director. So it's becoming dramaturg. Yeah. No, but seriously speaking, the function in the contemporary theater of a dramaturg you can describe actually on two fields. On the one hand, he is developing together or without the director, he's developing the concept of a show. He's searching for a certain interpretation. For instance, when you're doing a classical text, then you just can stage it like it is written, or you try to find an interpretation which is touching you in a certain way. So you read the text and you try to find out from this reading an interpretation and the perspective which might be interesting to you, to the director, to the actors, and later also to an audience. You're doing, in the best case, you help to create the text version of this. But this is the classical job of the German theater as it exists maybe now for, I don't know, maybe for 100 years. Yeah. But in the last time, it became more and more urgent because also the theaters changed. The dramaturgs started to work like curators, or let's say participated in the creation of the artistic program of the house besides the immediate theater shows. Yeah, and this has a tradition in Volksbühne which goes even to the 70s. Yeah, under the directorship of Benno Besson, the first so-called spectacles were organized. Spectacles in that time that meant that you do not show in one evening just one show, but that's a house for some hours, for 7-8 hours, maybe even for an entire day or the entire night, is completely full with different offers of theater shows. And the theater shows also are happening parallel. And this audience is moving through the house and can create, beside watching one show, can create also your own story of each evening you're doing. And what I was doing then, I mean, 40 years later, after this, when those spectacles were organized by Besson and his team, was to create and to curate political, artistic events, so events which were always on the edge, so the political and artistically, to look for a certain topic and to use the entire house of the Volksbühne to create such a spectacle, for instance, for 2-3 days. This is also a work of the dramaturg, but this is a work which is then more similar to a work of a curator, for instance.
But tell us which example, those 2 or 3 days of engagement, to give us an idea of a theme. Yeah. Who came? How did you organize it?
Yeah, for instance, this is what you quoted already in your introduction, was an event what we called. This was organized in 2015, what we called Africa Conference, the Berlinization of a continent. And that was dedicated to the African Conference, which took place in 1885 in Berlin, in the old Reichskanzlei, and where the leaders of the European countries came together and actually made the distinction of Africa and fixed the borders of an entire continent, which is still valid. And yeah, this kind of, I mean, when we hear now Berlin, yeah, so we always think, oh, this is this party capital and so on. And when Germans talk about the histories, and we always confess, of course, good, there was this very bad and evil Nazi time, but that's it. We don't want to go deeper to history, because the burden of the fascism is already enough on the shoulders of the Germans. But the entire colonization and the role which Germany played in it is still, I would say, wound, which is not enough opened on the table to bring it really to a conscience of the people in Germany. And so this was our aim, our target, objective of this event, to take the theme of the African conference, to invite artists from African countries, and to discuss the topic of this historical event on the one hand, but also of the continuity then, yeah, because there certain thinking was set up in the 19th century and in the colonization, which later then in the Nazi time, for instance, came up again. And yeah, so first we had the scene, we had an idea, we had the complex to discuss, and then we went ahead to invite artists from a lot of African countries, from Ghana, from Madagascar, from Kenya, and so on, but also theoreticians, also from Africa, but also from Germany, from France, and to discuss the Berlin Conference and its consequences in the 20th century.
Hmm. So, with your work, let's say you worked with Castorf on a play, let's say a Dostoevsky adaptation or whatever, and then you organized this event. Was that half and half of your work? You were half involved in productions, half you organized events, you created a space for representing the complexities of the lives we live in and showing the structures over centuries that have created it. So what is the percentage of time you spend on what we would call a traditional production and what you said, the curator's work, which is an interesting combination, the dramaturg curator, or the curator dramaturg, the dramaturgy of curation and the curation of dramaturgy. So how was that distributed?
That's actually difficult to answer, because actually the full-time job is already just to be in the productions. So to do the rest, at least for me, it was a bit like the hobby in the afternoon or in the night, or besides the production work. So the production, we did a lot of production, or I was involved in a lot of production. Also, I also must say, with a very different intensity. Yeah? So Frank Castorf is also a brilliant dramaturg by himself. Maybe he's even the best dramaturg at least in Germany. But at least it was always also okay for him, and also for the team of the house, to make something beside the original theater work. And then these conferences were one thing, but we organized then also political events, and also for Frank Castorf, those things were just important that they appear in the house, that you have, besides the artistic programs, that you also have always that kind of political program in the house.
So did people come, let's say, to your Africa event? How many people come? How many speakers did you have? How many people came?
Oh, I forgot. I mean, the house was full. I forgot how many days. Was it 2 days or 3 days? I think it was 3 days. Yeah, and it was full. I think 3,000-4,000 people, something like that. I don't have some concrete figure.
Incredible.
Yeah, and because you have the capacity of the main hall, which has around capacity for 1,000 people, but the theater was open during the entire day then. Yeah? So we started with the performances also in the small venues of the house at noon, for instance. Yeah. And then, of course, you do have, at a certain time, you then only have 1,500 or 2,000 people in the house. But during these 2-3 days, then you have 4,000 people maybe, which are attending such an event. And yeah, Volksbühne is not only the main hall and the main stage, which is huge, but it has plenty of smaller venues. It has a big foyer, which can be used for artistic shows. It has a cantina. We also opened the part of the house which is actually just for administrational purposes, so where you have offices and so on. And by opening the house in this way, of course, you create also for the audience always a very special event, just that you can move as you want in these caves and in these tunnels and in the basement of the house, and to discover new locations. And by discovering new locations, you're also always discovering new topics and new artists and new artistic performances.
So the audience, in a way, used the house, performed the role of the audience member in the house. And did they have to pay? Was it open, free? What was the?
No, it's like always. Unfortunately, it's very difficult. We always wanted to make those events free, and also the political events. This is a bit tricky with the German law. So there was an entry fee, but this was very, very moderate. So I don't remember how exactly this was. I think 10 euros maybe, or 15 euros. So this was a very moderate fee. And one must say also not only that the Volksbühne as a city-run theater has, of course, subsidies. The subsidies of the city for those events. We also ask for special money, in that case, to the Federal Culture Foundation, who also funded this project with a certain amount of money.
Sebastian, for you, just to ask to speak for you, what do you think? What is the work of a dramaturg? What should it be about, in your definition?
I mean, maybe this is now an epilogue. Also, maybe I will never work again as a dramaturg, and will deal just with other things. I never learned it in that way. I never got an education as dramaturg. So therefore, I don't have a formula for this. Everybody must somehow find out what it is or what he can do as a dramaturg. I came to this job or to this position as a dramaturg actually on a way which went far away. So I was doing together with a friend a huge artistic event in a former military bunker in Crimea, in a Taurus mountain. Yeah, this was
Crimea, Ukraine.
In Crimea, in Ukraine, so till 100% Ukraine, and then all these events after, with 2014 shaped the situation, and very, very heavy. But of course, the projects, those international projects, only were possible before 2014. After that, it's simply not possible. First project was in 2006, and the other was in 2010, and that was for me actually the most intense experience to work as a curator or as a dramaturg, but you cannot learn it, because I visited that place together with a friend shortly after the last military unit, shortly after the last submarine went out of this marvelous bay, Balaklava, close to Sevastopol, in Crimea, and I just had to walk together with the director from Moscow in this former military town. We hired a fisherman, or fisherman brought us on a little boat in this now abandoned bunker for submarines, which is located exactly in the Taurus mountain. The Taurus mountain, where you have the entire Greek mythology of Iphigenia on Taurus and so on. And that place was closed as a military town till the late 90s. And this was for me such a gift to be in the right moment at the right place, and to have together with the director from Moscow the idea, let's do a cultural event there. Let's create something in this Taurus mountain. Let's integrate the people who worked in this bunker. Let's integrate the people from the inhabitants from this little former military bay in an artistic project, and to try to create something culturally in a location, on a location which was before this only used for military purposes. And by doing so this was making art in real time of the change of an entire city. And this artistic project then really had an immediate impact, actually, at least in a short period, to this change of this very, very special cultural place in the south of Crimea. And by doing so, learning by doing, and in doing so, I just got the ability to write a concept, to write an application to foundations. No foundation, no government, not from the Ukrainian, not from the Russian side, gave any money to this project. So this was really just the strength of this location and of this place to go ahead with this project and to formulate something. And by doing so, then somehow, you got a certain ability to create and to produce artistic events. And this was maybe then the button to continue it then also in Volksbühne. But I must say, before I did this, I already worked as, I made an intern already in '98 and worked as an assistant in Volksbühne already as, in the 90s. So these Ukrainian things and Crimean things, this was even after my first experience in Volksbühne.
So you created performances, talks,
right.
gatherings in the Crimea, and then people heard
in
about
the bunker, inside the bunker,
like a theater, a dark room in a black box of a bunker.
Giant water channel of 400 meters, a bunker which had to bear an atomic, which could bear an atomic attack, with facilities where torpedoes were built, and everything underground, but with water. So actually, this is a big cathedral which talks a lot about the. It's impossible to take it away. You cannot. I mean, it's a bit like with tribunes from the Nazis in Nuremberg, or even in Germany. When after the war there was an intention to take it away and to destroy it, to get rid of these monuments of the Nazi time. But these things were simply too heavy. It's impossible to destroy it, so that you have still these tribunes and so on from the Nazis. And it's a bit the same with these military facilities from the Cold War, which were built in this obsession of a potential atomic attack, and which serve now actually like monuments or cathedrals or ruins of a certain period of mankind.
Of time. And then you in a way went to that cathedral of the Volksbühne also, that was built before in a completely other time, perhaps for a subscription system that in that way also didn't exist anymore with workers. You as a dramaturg, what was your aim? What did you feel, you and Castorf and everybody, Martel, what was the idea? What did you wanted to bring to the city of Berlin? What was the idea of the Volksbühne?
I mean, I cannot speak about the entire idea. There was not we were not sitting there at a table and then thinking which product we want to create. Actually, this was liberal in a sense that everybody participated just in this project of Volksbühne and put it in this project its own ideas. Frank Castorf made his shows, and at least for these shows, I can describe the target as something to make the things more complex. So when you quoted, when you said, for instance, when you staged a Dostoevsky show, then of course you just do it in a regular way. You're reading the text, you're figuring out who can play which role, and so on. But this was somehow not enough, and we tried always to go to a certain time, in that case to the time of the 19th century, and to put even more content in it, to draw a more complex pictures than even the novel is drawing this. For instance, in the one show Gambler we created in the house, we found there some political writings of Dostoevsky, how he's dreaming about colonizing Asia, how he is thinking that Constantinople must be reopened again as a third Roman city to Byzance and to St. Petersburg, to the Tsar and so on. And then we took those political texts and tried, beside just staging Gambler, and tried to write and to draw a broader picture of an entire time, of a period, which is maybe then, which we have to decodate in a different way, and we have to decodate just a novel. Yeah. But concerning the house, I mean, there were so many artists. I was just a very little piece in this. There were so many brilliant artists beside Frank Castorf, the scenographer, of course, Bert Neumann, who developed, even when he made a set design, this was also half of the dramaturgical concept already, when he made the set design, for instance, for The Gambler or for Brother Karamazov. The actors put it in their impact, had the ideas for the shows. So beside this, that's a house, of course, in a very classical and even not so sympathetic way, was hierarchical organized. It always gave the free space to the artists to participate in it and to develop there in a pretty radical way, actually their own wishes and projects. And Volksbühne was the addition of all these pieces.
Yeah, no, it was an extraordinary, or still is, but at that time, an extraordinary place in a way. Also, like a Schaubühne, it defined a way of theater. They also like two different, families, two construction sites. They maybe didn't overlap too much, but especially for East Berlin, the work of the Volksbühne was shining. It defined in a way also the image of Berlin. I think, just to remind Bert Neumann, who you said who created the logos for the Volksbühne, which reflected the Lebensgefühl, the feel of living in Berlin, the aesthetics. An entire city saw itself reflected also in that change of a theater. It once used to be the workers' theater, then it was part of the Nazi regime, then it was a communist, the communist East German government, and then now it opened up to the West, so all the open rooms and all the open strains of history, the circles, where it came together there. And it is inspiring to hear that you say it was such an open place where people got together, that did their things. And it's true, very different. I like very much what you said about the dramaturg. I never learned it. Nobody, perhaps also one cannot learn it. That you learned it by doing. So which of the shows you felt you were connected most when you worked at the Volksbühne? Which is the one you...
Well, actually, these were the shows which dealt with a very, very precise history of the location even of Volksbühne. So one of my absolutely favorite shows was Kaufmann from Berlin, the Merchant of Berlin by Walter Mehring, an expressionist writer from the 20s. And he's really the
cabaret artist also, right, in the very beginning.
Yeah, right. He was writing for cabaret as well. And Piscator staged that show already, not in Volksbühne. It was already when he was kicked out as an artistic director in the late 20s. He made it in the Piscator stage at Neuendorfplatz, I think in 29. And that show and that play of Mehring deals with the concrete location and with the place where Volksbühne is located. Let's say in this triangle of Alexanderplatz, which you have. And Alexanderplatz in that time, as Döblin writes about it, in his novel Berlin Alexanderplatz, full with criminals, the depraved people. This was Karl Marx would describe the Lumpenproletariat, which collected around the Alexanderplatz, proletarians. On the other hand, the Jewish quarter, which was till the Nazis came to power, just on the opposite of Volksbühne, with Grenadierstraße, Hirtenstraße there. So the entire Jewish life of the immigrants and refugees who fled and escaped from the October Revolution in 1917 from the eastern countries, like from Ukraine, from Russian Empire, but also from White Russia, from South Poland, from Galicia. They settled down. The poor refugees. They settled down in Rosa-Luxemburg, in this area, which is now around Rosa-Luxemburg Square, Bülowplatz at that time. And the immediate neighbor of the Volksbühne is former headquarter of the Communistic Party. Yeah, and Pescator was a member of the Communist Party, and it was also his intention to make agitation in the sense of Marx imagined it, to create a conscience of the people and of the proletarians for a certain for their working and living condition, maybe to unite them later and to create revolutionary subjects out of them. And Mehring is taking these different influences from the concrete location of Rosa-Luxemburg-Platz, is shaking this together. He's writing actually like taking a camera and going around to all these different places, to the Jewish community, to the Alexanderplatz. Then always cut. Yeah, this fast expressionist writing. This was actually one of my most favorite shows. This Sophie Royce played the main role, played the merchant of Berlin in this. Yeah, but it's also because it was so precise and historical and dealing with this very concrete location of Volksbühne.
Yeah, no, truly, they had their own still have, or have been, mostly had their own style. Lots of Castorf productions were famous for the length of it, for a stage design that could basically never leave the stage of the Volksbühne. It was too complicated to assemble and disassemble somewhere else. It was really specific and just made for that theater, for that time, in that place. I also remember when you once came to the Segal and talked about your work, that he had a unique work of videotaping rehearsals, or something. This is a radically different approach of creating a piece on a stage, if which is also in a way a dramaturgical idea. Maybe tell us a bit about that. What
you mean about the working style of Frank Castorf?
Yeah, so that which is part of that aesthetic of the Volksbühne Berlin, what he created, or his work. I think it's not so known.
You mean that he used also camera in the shows, and that video was a big part in this?
Often there would be one rehearsal or two for. I don't know if
this is right. But this is this thing. I mean that it's always a question how you keep theater vital, and how you bring a certain idea and energy which you have in a rehearsal stage and in the rehearsal situation, how you bring it then really also in the shows to the stage. And the answer of Frank Castorf, his special working style is this, that actually each scene it's drawn as a draft actually only once. Yeah, so he's improvising together with actors on the base of his preparation. He's improvising each scene only once. And then it's an enormous work for the assistants as well, then in the shows, to fix everything, to write it down. All the rehearsals are recorded with cameras, and then the assistants, they made night shifts, and they try to fix everything like in a script in a film script, actually. Yeah, and then this film script is handed to the actors, and the actors learn it then till actually the premiere. Yeah, because there's never actually the time for a run through. This is a very brutal method, because this brings especially the actors, of course, to the edge of this, what is just physically possible to do on stage, and to memorize these enormous masses of texts. I mean, you must understand, you have the novel of Karamazov, for instance, these 1,400 pages. And there's no fixed text version before the rehearsals start. Yeah, so the actors have only the time to memorize the texts they only have during the rehearsal process by itself, which is normally not longer than between 3 and 5 weeks, maybe. Yeah, and in this time, the actors have not only to learn their role and all these movements on stage, but also the text. So physically, this is a high level sport actually for the actors. But the idea beyond this, if you can say so, that there is a certain method beyond this, is how to bring a vital atmosphere from the rehearsal stage and from the first impulse of an idea, how to transform and to translate this then to each show.
Yeah, it's almost like a subconscious, Zen-like capturing of the moment within the moment. I just want to say it again, how radical that idea was of Castorf, the Volksbühne. He would say, this is the scene, this is the text, we're going to rehearse it once. You do whatever you feel close to, it's going to be taped. And tomorrow we do another scene. And then we redo, maybe with some massaging or some cuts, but we're going to redo what we are doing here. So it was also an actor's theater. And I mean, supposedly Karl Lagerfeld was known to read books, and he would tear out that page once he read it and burn it or throw it away. So I'm never going to read it again, so I have to focus on it. So this idea of a director rehearsing once and then like collaging it, things, if more or less, it's if I understand right. Yeah. I'm sure it's not so black and white, but it is quite a radical idea.
I think it's not only that Frank Castorf was just sitting with a pencil on the table and thought, oh no, I'm developing now a concept where I rehearse only once. I think this was also developed during all these decades he is working as a director. And he is working since decades with the same actors also. And I mean, I entered that style and that theater pretty late, when Castorf was working already 30 years in theater. I was less than 30 in that time when I worked first time with him together. So there he had already a working experience for 30 years. I think that style came to this point just by doing it and working under this project for 30 years with the same actors who know how he works and who understand the ideas much faster than when a new actor is just entering, let's say, this system, for instance. So there's also a close relation, an artistic relation between the director, the actors, and the scenographer. And even in a wider sense, people who are dealing with the costumes, with the ones who are making the light, because they understand certain impulses and how to transform them to stage. It's an artistic collective which is doing this.
In a way, a real collective, and what the actor did in the rehearsal did matter, you know. So it was a kind of co-directing in a sense, and then all these events, as you said before, around it. And so were the Schlingensief productions things that were first, he creates something around it, or when he ran for chancellor or other things, what was it, or was it always also a production of its own? Was the beginning to have him as a director to come, or to create part of the atmosphere around this? Great.
Unfortunately, I never worked together with Schlingensief, so I was always just in the audience hall as one of these 1,000 people or 500 people. Therefore, I have no insights to the work of Schlingensief. But of course, he had definitely another method also to work and to create these shows. With Schlingensief, you should not forget that he comes from the film. Of course. So before he worked first time in theater, before Matthias Liebenthal was calling him to work in Volksbühne, he made a lot of those films which you can call underground films, actually. And he created, for instance, one of the, for me, still strongest comments on the reunion, on the reunion process, of the reunion of the two German states, when he directed and made in 89 and 90, when he shot the film The Chainsaw Massacre. Yeah. And where he said, okay, this is now the process of reunification, and this has only one aim, to make out sausages out of the peoples from the East. Yeah. And this is in its radicality. He made this film just during the process of the unification, in this process of unification, and had this very, very radical thesis. 10 years later, he said, even though I was wrong with my film, and saying, oh, maybe he said, no, it was good because of democracy and so on. He said, no, it was even worse. The Aussies were not transformed to sausages. It was even worse. They were made. Out of them was done porridge. It was only porridge, even not sausage. I don't know if I make myself clear. My English is a bit limited.
No, that is incredible. I mean, what it shows is that this theater that really worked and functioned and had fans, it was full. People are coming. But that's when this closeness to that idea of curation, closeness to visual art or to film, interdisciplinary work, political discussion. I think you brought in big philosophers, right? You brought in significant thinkers and writers to talk.
Actually, we tried to leave the level just of talks, because I mean, in Volksbühne and my colleagues, Karl Hegemann, he started with this actually to bring talks to theater, philosophical talks to theater. Yeah. So Slavoj Žižek was very early in the 90s with his founding of the NSK, New Slovenian Art State. New Slovenian Art State was founded in Volksbühne. Slavoj Žižek was one of these speakers. Boris Greuß very often was a speaker in Volksbühne. But this were the 90s, and the 90s were this time where there was a longing and the need for analyzation of this, what's going on. The time changed since then. I mean, in the States, you had the period of Trump, but also in Germany, there was a threat of that right-wing movement was growing, and the threat even not only of a right-wing movement in one stage, but of an international movement of fascists, let's say it in that way. So it's not only the time of describing the problem of this, what's going on, but to use also the free space, free public space, which at least in Germany the theaters still are, and this is a big bonus and the big thing of the theaters in Germany, and to use that free space and even to help to create political movements. Yeah, so it is very common in German theater to invite dissidents from Russia, from Ukraine, from the North African countries, and to celebrate and to admire them for their struggle against the governments. But I always ask myself, what gives us the right to invite these people and to make us equal with them? Because these people in their countries, they risk so much. Yeah. Before we meet with them, we also should actually risk something, or we should introduce also these dissidents of the West. They exist. It's not only that in our system everything is fine and nice, and the countries in the East, they just have to adaptate to our model. And therefore, I initiated a serial with talks about Europe, where we put the focus on the dissidents of the West, and invited people like Edward Snowden, who was sitting in that time already in Moscow. So actually with him, we had a video conference, home office conference, or being locked in Moscow conference. Always Julian Assange, who was sitting that time already in the Ecuadorian embassy and could not leave it. So we had first that serial of talks, among others also with Slavoj Žižek. And after a first meeting and first talk with the former finance minister from Greece, Yanis Varoufakis, there arose slowly the idea not only to talk, but to act also, and to take action. And out from this idea, then there came the founding of a political pan-European progressive movement, this movement you quoted also in your introduction, DiEM25. Which then even was candidating and taking part in the European elections, and which in that year established even a bigger project together with Sanders Foundation. In this stage, they created now even a wilder movement than just a European movement. Together with the Sanders Foundation, they created now a Progressive International. Yeah, and this is really an outcome and possibilities still of the German theaters that we really should not forget, by all its critics about the hierarchical organization which the theater has. All these critics are right and should be taken under consideration for improvement. But the German theater, the theaters as free spaces on the one hand for create that really the artists are completely free in their artistic creation and in the artistic style they want to use, and in using that free space also for political messages, this is something what is unique, what does not exist in that way in the most countries of the world, not in the States, I would say, not in Russia, not in the Asian countries. And my idea was always to use that free space even to help to create, to form those political movements.
Yeah. It is stunning. I mean, to remind our listeners, especially in the US, I think up to 80% most probably of the cost of the Volksbühne, which I guess is 120 million a year, or
no, the Volksbühne has a budget which comes from the state of 17 million.
70 million,
17,
oh,
17.
17. Okay.
17.
The opera, 17, 17.
But still,
17.
What is still a lot? I mean, this is not the richest,
the highest subsidized theater in Berlin.
No,
this is close. But you say that you got money from the city of Berlin, and you still were one of the most fiercest critic of the city, of the capitalistic system, but you still had the space to create and discuss it, and it worked. It connected people to the town, and in a way, you also confirmed that it is actually a free society because you could say that, you could do that. And also early on hinting, I mean, you said where you live now, you are born in Berlin, Mitte and East Berlin. 95% of all the people who live in your street left after the wall came down, right?
I mean, the figures do not exist for the street, but only for the areas and the districts. And during the last 30 years, so I would say that 95% of the people were gentrified out of the city. So there are only very, very few people left. And when I want to speak with Berlin dialect and want to meet people speaking with this Berlin dialect, I have to go to the supermarket and have to go to the cashiers. So the cashiers and these low level jobs, there you have the people from Berlin, but they hardly live in these gentrified areas because they simply are too expensive, and so they are just kicked out from their native neighborhoods.
Yeah. And the place also already polished, and so we had early dealt with that in quite a fierce and open way. Sebastian, here a question perhaps also closer to us in the US. You saw change in Germany. You grew up in East Berlin and you witnessed the opening of the wall. And as Thomas Oberender always reminds us, it's the opening, it's not the fallout. People went on the street, people worked for it, people demonstrated also for it. So the wall, you worked in Soviet Union, in the Ukraine, through
Soviet Union.
In the former Soviet Union, the Crimea region of the Ukraine. You also now work in China, in the Beijing University system. So these are three radical changes have taken place in these societies. How, for us here, and at least we feel this is a moment of change in the US, in the New York, or wherever, there's something is different, will be different after the COVID, hopefully the election point in that way. So what do you think works? What can theater do? What is necessary? What can we learn from what you have seen, what you have been involved in?
I don't have a recipe for this. The first, I think, what really we must understand now, that this was happening now with a pandemic and with COVID. This is really a system change, and it is one which comes not like the bang many people and even the leftists maybe expected, like in a form of revolution or of a crash of the banks and so on. I think this is a tsunami which comes in the speed of a snail. Yeah, but that tsunami will change everything and a lot. And the first thing, I think, what we have to learn is to have a perception for this dramatic change of society. Actually, when you, George, invited me to the Segal Center, I was reading and rereading just one text of Baudrillard 3 years ago. I read this text already in
Baudrillard, the French philosopher. Yeah.
Yes, I read these texts already in the time of in the university, but I forgot how political it is. And in '89, so when just the Cold War ended and when the wall was taken out from Berlin and from the chessboard of politics, he said, hey, let's not be too optimistic. It's not like that we open now just the Iron Curtain and everything will be fine and great and the democracy will come to the eastern countries like the turtle is finding its way to the sea. Yeah, but when the East Bloc is toying, he's saying so. So John Breuer is using this model. When the East Bloc is toying, then everything comes up what was perceived in this ice block. And what was perceived in this ice block are viruses. And this is Baudrillard saying in '89. And when the ice block now is toying, then this virus, it's coming and it's going to the West. And with the virus, the virus is connected with a certain potential of destruction and of destabilization. And that virus will destabilize also the Western countries and the Western societies. But in the same process, when the virus comes from the East, there's of course the evil virus from the West, which is going from the West to the East. All these obsession with consumption, all these obsession with the media, all this spectacle of the media, which is not connected with analyzation. So what he used, even Baudrillard, in '89, the formula to say virus for virus. Yeah, we thought, okay, we have post-communistic area. We have this, what Francis Fukuyama is saying. We have now the endless, enduring liberalism. Yeah, the end of history just started in '89, and now the entire world will only go to the shining side of life. But I said, no, this is the area of virus, actually, what started. And when it was '89, the crisis and the crash of the West and of the communist system, I think what we are witnessing now is the same crisis even of the West. Yeah. And when you ask me for a recipe, I don't have this recipe. But I think first we must understand that crisis of a recipe. And the advantage of all these people from the East is that they went already through this crisis. They know what it means to be disorientated, to lose the jobs, to be just in a certain historical situation, helpless and without support and orientation, and so on. So this is an advantage of the people from the East. What can I recommend? The thing is, theaters are important for two things. On the one hand, of course, for the artistic creation, for this unique space where people can meet in an intimate space and to have an artistic outcome in a protected, intimate space. This is one thing. The other is the public space and the role to interfere as a public space to a society. I think this is something what also the theaters, as you described it yesterday, the theaters are abandoned now at the Broadway. And I don't know how accessible these theaters are, but that could be an interesting thing actually to use these theaters also to substitute the public spaces which are just in all these lockdown processes which are gone, and to have a talk about this, what comes next and how we can unite and create something together for
I think you once said that also in Moscow, after the collapse of Soviet Union, hundreds of theaters, they were shut down, they were empty, they were closed, right?
Not in Moscow. I mean, this was just an example. What is important for the people in a crisis. Yeah, and now when I see it and when I hear the statements from the directors of German theaters saying, "Oh, theater is so necessary, and this is really like breathing and like eating bread." I mean, it's good that they are saying so, but I'm a bit suspicious that they mean maybe only also the privileges which are connected with the theater world and maybe their own contracts. What happened in the post-Soviet time was that a lot of theaters and culture houses were just used not as theaters, but for instance as green markets. Or I saw still in Kiev in 2005, I still saw in the center of the town a former culture house, big culture house for maybe it was maybe 600 seats, which was just a usual market where people could buy cheap clothes and so on. And there you see how important theater is in this moment when people have really other problems, when they have existential problems, and when they have a feeling which can be described with hunger.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting, yeah, to say this was also a contribution of a theater house to be a place where you could buy the jacket you need,
Yeah.
and perhaps talk to someone, and they're coming together in the idea of a towns and flea markets. We're coming closer also to the end. Sebastian, I know that you are taking a bit time out in that old, almost monkish tradition to think what one does. Not you did it even before I think the Corona crisis hit. But still, in your heart, I do think you are a dramaturg. And is there something you see, what you think about, or example, what one could say, is there kind of a new dramaturgy evolving? Maybe also something after a Volksbühne, but in what you personally think about, or examples you see. Do you think there is a recalibration? And if so, what would be examples?
I mean, I cannot speak for the new dramaturgy as a system. I'm sure that now this crisis, the crisis is somehow healthy, also like Atto wrote it. So theater is infectious, but you can go out of this infection only on two ways, either with healing or with death. Yeah, and this is a radical position. And I think that's it's existential crisis. The question why theater will also lead to a lot of new trials and new models of theater networking. Digitalization will play a role of it. Which one we have to see. I'm interested at the moment actually in this, what I tried to describe with Jean Baudrillard, who was talking about the era of a virus, and to think about the last 30 years as that kind of era of a virus, which led to this point in which we are living in. And I was thinking now the last months about a model, how to react on this crisis. And you have outside, you have a virus, then of course you go to quarantine and you protect yourself. The person who is doing this is a hermit. Yeah, and the hermit is living in a cave or is isolated from the other people, maybe in his living room or in a laboratory of a theater. So I'm thinking about this, how to vitalize this model of a hermit and maybe of a network of caves. Caves can be everything. This can be a living room, this can be a rehearsal room, this can be a real cave somewhere in the mountains where an artist is living. I'm trying to think about an intelligent network of caves and of an artistic production in such a model. I mean, it's not 100% fixed what in which direction it can go, but I want to use that model: hermit, cave, networking, keeping also international. That is so important because we are all locked now in our rooms and in our countries because there's no possibility to travel, but remaining in contact to our artists and friends in other countries is so important. And therefore I appreciate also your project with the Segal Talks so much, because this is such a good example to discuss and to connect people from everywhere in the world. I think this is actually also a new kind of post-pandemic dramaturgy, what you are doing with the Segal Talks.
Yeah, well, thank you. That means a lot to me. That you think it's meaningful. And how interesting that in a way, the old Platonic idea of mankind, even the caves and the shadows, that you say, in a way, maybe we have to go back there and start and or take it serious also as a for a new beginning, and not modify or adapt. There's disruptions and there are modifications. Like someone said, the iPhone was a disruption on the phone market, and now the Google phone is a modification of the iPhone. But maybe it is a time of serious disruption, and we don't modify what was before and massage it, but perhaps it is a time where we really radically have to rethink. I like very much what you said about dramaturgy, also the role of a dramaturg, that you actually you have to get involved. You have to do productions. You have to do your own project. Then people get together for a certain amount of time, almost like a rock band. When you play together, and then it lasts however long or short. It has to that, which is not so important. It's more important that it's good, like a good novel. It's not important how long it is, but it has to be good. And that you say this is a way to do dramaturgical work, to be close to curating, to the visual arts, to film, and the other. So that is really a significant, impulse also for us to think about, and your experience in these times of changes you already went through, and perhaps there's something that is ahead of us. And we will continue to explore this week at the Segal Center, the idea of dramaturgy. And there will be also other weeks we feel it's at the center also, next to that idea also what we last week, the theater of the real, that we also will talk on site-specific or on-site theater, as Bertie Thortman reminds us to call it. But the idea of a dramaturgy perhaps is what's missing and has been missing there. Bigger context that really reflects the complexities of the world with additional areas, arenas that theater gives to audiences to think, to discuss, to show the best ideas, to have a competition of good ideas in an agonistic way, as we learned from Thomas Florian Malzacher when we talked with him. So tomorrow we will continue, and we have the great Catania from Lincoln Center Theater, who over decades also runs the Directors Lab. He's been very influential, a global project, very significant. And she will come and speak with Sidney Mahone about the golden age, in a way, when dramaturgy entered the American stage in the 70s and 80s. And she actually was a motor, an important part of it. And it's good to remind her where we come from in all her work she created with Lambda, and now she's creating a Wikipedia page of documenting that work. And on Friday we have Peter Eckersell, my colleague at the Graduate Uni, who is teaching dramaturgy, also has ideas of a new dramaturgy, is writing a book at the moment, and we will join him in the process while he is also trying to figure things out in the lockdown, more or less, next to his work, to think about that, what is not there, but what is so important and essential. So really, Sebastian, this was a great talk, and I hope we will have other ones that people who will listen to can contact you, that you will find also ways of engagement, in the times ahead of you that connect to that experience. I'm sure of that. I think it's also courageous, as you said, we invite other people who speak up with risk. Are we taking really the risk? Are we as honest, as those people we might invite and present in a way for you also to say, I go now in the research phase, I go in a cave, I rethink maybe this is the best to do at this moment, to think right and to collect and connect to what's inside us. So it's an important contribution also in how to deal with this time. So thanks to HowlRound for being a platform for this global discussion, that I think you're also right. We can no longer think in national borders, even so New York already is so vastly different than Texas or California or Alabama. In one nation already it is so different. The word meaning already has so many different meanings, but if there is a fight for ecological crisis against racism and others, it's a global one actually, and it might help us to get through it, and we have to honor that. So thank you. Thanks
thank
to the
you
Segal
for invitations. Thank you for giving the possibility for the talk.
Thank you. HowlRound for Vijay, the great Sia, who gets up in Los Angeles every morning before 9 a.m., which is terribly early for every actor and director, so we appreciate that. And I hope you will all continue to listen to us. We will take a break in Thanksgiving week and then be back after that. So Sebastian, again, thank you. And I'm sure we only scratched the surface, but I think we get an idea for the idea. And this was a really illuminating and a very meaningful conversation. Thank you.
Thank